Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, good morning for everyone that is also from New Zealand. So we are very happy to have you guys here today. It's the 22nd meetup of Power BI Portugal community. And this event, we have a very special guest. We have Reza Rad. This event, we'll do it all in English, as we have our special international guests. So for this event, we do everything in English. The video will also be available in YouTube later, so you can also do the instant translation to other language if it's better for you. Let us introduce a little bit our community and our agenda. So we will start our event. We'll do a quick intro, and we'll have Rui Romano, one of our community team members, to give you some news about Power BI. And July we have a lot of news, so it will be very good to hear from him. And then about 10-15 minutes later, we'll start our main event with Reza Rad about Dataflow versus Dataset, the Power BI architecture you should follow. And in the end, we'll have a little bit of time for some Q&A with Reza, which should be very interesting. So you guys, if you have questions, you can put it you will have a side chat in the Teams live event, and you can put some questions. About our community, just a few words. So we are a group of Power BI users and enthusiasts. We cover a lot of areas in Power BI, and Power BI really has been growing. It's going to be 5 years in 2 days, so it's really growing fast and furious. So we cover a lot of the areas. Here is our team. We have 8 co-founders and members. And right now we have grown to more than 2,000 community members, which in just a little over a year and about 1 year and a half, it's really good. So we've been growing and we feel positive feedback. We are doing mostly the events live, but we have been doing what we can and leveraging the COVID situation to do a little bit of webinars. It's for people to live events, and we live doing it a lot. It's not so good, but we have also the amazing opportunity to bring someone to share his knowledge with us, like Reza today, which is also amazing. Some of our channels, we have a Meetup where we publish all our events. We have our LinkedIn page to find some information, and also GitHub where we present some PDFs and PPT for our presentations. And also we have WhatsApp. You can just use the tiny URL link and you can join the chat, and you can do very informal and casual talking with the community members and get some of your questions answered. And so we go to the quick updates. So I will pass to Rui. Rui.
Hello. Hello.
All right.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Rui.
As in previous events, I will do a quick update. Not all the updates. So there are other updates that came in the July update, but I will focus on the most important ones. Let's start with a quick remember. So Power BI is 5 years now. Commemorating the 5 years milestone. Next Thursday, there will be a YouTube live event that you can subscribe, and you can see some offers on T-shirts, and I will recommend you to subscribe and to see the event. Regarding the news, I will start with the first one. That's for me the most important one. Is the integration with external tools. This is something that exists. It's not a new that Power BI allows you to integrate with some amazing community tools like ALEM Toolkit, DAX Studio, and Tabular Editor. But right now you can launch it directly from the Power BI desktop, which makes this way more easier. So you can, for example, launch DAX Studio already connected to your data model and start authoring queries, DAX queries, diagnosing doing some query profiling without having to discover the TCP port of your tabular model. The three tools that are available from the start are the ALM toolkit that will allow you to do schema comparing, application lifecycle management scenarios. You have DAX Studio, that is a well-known tool for DAX authoring, and for me the most important one is Tabular Editor. If you don't know Tabular Editor, you are missing a great productivity boost, and Tabular Editor is the only way for you to do some not unsupported, but to do some features that you cannot do in Power BI Desktop. For example, one of the most powerful ones is calculation groups, and with calculation groups you can do time intelligence in a very easy way, and not having to create one measure for each variation of your measure. You can do translation, you can do perspectives, but this is open. You can also create your own and use other external tools. You only need to register a JSON file into a specific place in your computer. I also recommend you, if you want to learn more about calculation groups, there is an amazing video by Marco Russo that will explain how to use it. Another amazing update is the integration with Azure Maps. Azure Maps is Azure's service that you can subscribe, and it will allow you to do some pretty amazing stuff with mappings in Power BI. I will give you one example, a couple of examples. So the first one, you can have live traffic of the streets and plotting your data into the map. You can have tiles of layers or custom shapes like you can do already with the Esri maps, that will allow you to have specific shapes into a map and then plot your data points into the map. And you can also have layers, and for this part, I believe that you need to have the Azure. You will need to pay the Azure service, but it will allow you to do, for example, plotting your data points and then have a layer that will show, for example, the weather. And you are able to see that, for example, in Miami, it's a lot more hotter than in Orlando. Then that's why you have more sales. So Azure Maps is a great update, and I encourage you to play with it. There are also some enhancements into the Q&A. So Power BI team has been making a lot of improvements into the Q&A. I really like this last one that will basically list in a table all the synonyms that your tables has. So you can, in the past, you will need to go to the diagram view and select the column and see the synonyms for each column. So right now you have a list of all the synonyms for all the tables and all the columns of your data model. Another cool update is every time there is an ambiguous term, it will highlight those ambiguous terms. Also an update into the Q&A dialog window. Now, other one, this is a simple update, but this is also something that was asked by the community. So in Power BI workspaces, you have 4 levels of permissions. You have the admin that will give you the entire access to the entire control of the workspace. You have the member that you can, the main difference between the admin and the member is that the member cannot delete the workspace, cannot add another admin, but can have other members and could update the workspace into an application. And then you have the contributor role. The contributor role, basically, it only allows you to create content into the workspace and to view the content, of course. But in the past, if you wanted to update an application, you want to convert the Power BI workspace and update it as an application, this will require you to be a member. So what Power BI team allow you now is you can go into the workspace and allow contributors to update and to publish the workspace as an app. So if you do that, the contributor will only be able to create content into the work in the workspace, and it also has the ability to update and to publish the workspace as an app. So this is pretty handy in those enterprise level Power BI deployments. And another update for those that use iOS and iPhones is now you have a dark mode. It's not available in Android. It will come. It's announced that it will come this year, but right now it's only in iOS, which is pretty cool if you are into the dark mode. And last but not least, there are a lot of Excel financial functions that get published into the last Power BI desktop, into the last version of Power BI desktop. So and all these functions, they have the same name that you have you already of the Excel functions, and you can do things like yielding, you can do things like price calculation, duration. So there are a lot of this for those that come from financial experts in Excel. They will find this very handy. Of course, that you could calculate a lot of this, the results of these functions by using DAX, but sometimes it will require you a lot of effort to do it. And now it's available out of the box. And I will pass this to Reza. I would like to thank you all for attending, and especially Reza for making the time to be with us and talking to us about data flows. And Reza.
Great. Thank you, Roy. Let me share my screen as well.
Let's just put you live, Reza. Let's put you on the camera. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, let me know whenever you can see my screen.
All right, you're good to go. Thank you so much again for joining us. And let me just give a few words before you start. So I think most of our community already knows you, and since you've been an inspiration for many of our members in the community, I don't know how many times I referenced your book, The Power BI from Zero to Hero, as free online content, and it's really great to have you today with us. So thank you for joining so early for you, and I give you the word.
Thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate that. And thank you for the opportunity, for all organizers to host it, and for everyone who joined us today. It's really a great pleasure to be with you. Today we are going to talk about data flows and dataset, my favorite topic in the Power BI architecture. Just a little bit about me before I start. I'm Reza Rad. I'm based in New Zealand, like exactly opposite side of the world. If you put a pin where you are down all the way to the core of Earth, you'll see it coming out probably somewhere in New Zealand. It's like morning right now in here, 6:15 a.m. of tomorrow, and normally, like before COVID-19, I used to fly around, do a lot of like conferences, speaking, training courses and things like that. Now, these days with the COVID-19, I'm basically just sitting behind my desk doing everything like remotely, which is a different experience, let's say. I'm a author of some books, as mentioned already. One of them, Power BI from Rookie to Rockstar. You can download it from our website. It's just absolutely free. These are my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions regarding anything related to this session or Power BI in general. I'll be more than happy to check out what challenges you've got. I'm also an active blogger. If you follow Radacad website, we have like blogs coming out every week and videos as well. So go ahead and check those free materials over there. Now, the topic today is data flow versus dataset. To understand that separation, it's good to understand what is the persona of users working with Power BI first. There are different personas of users working with Power BI. If we split it in, let's say, two main categories, one is, let's say, a single developer persona, a persona of a single, let's say, business analyst, one person developing the solution, compared to the scenario of multiple developers. If we are talking about a single business analyst, single developer in a team, or it might be in the whole organization, this person might do like one reporting solution for the entire team, but he or she is the only person building this Power BI solution. For this persona, Power BI is great. It's ideal because you can have one single Power BI file. You can open Power BI desktop, get data from different places, do data transformation, load it into a Power BI, create relationships, calculations, do the visualization. Everything happens in one Power BI file. It's really simple. You publish it to the workspace and then create an app on top of it and share it with your end users. But the whole development side of it all happening in one PBIX file, one Power BI file. It's easy to maintain. Every time you want to make change, you just open that PBIX file and apply changes and publish it again. This, however, is a little bit different when we talk about multiple developers. Even if we talk about one single developer developing multiple solutions, that is the same thing. If we are talking about multiple developers, they might work with different solutions, or sometimes they work with one solution at the same time. And if we want to follow the same rules of having like one single file, there are a lot of challenges in that kind of environment, because right now you cannot really have one PBIX file developed parallel at the same time by multiple developers. If I'm going to make a change and you are going to make a change on the same PBIX file, we are going to have two different versions of PBIX file. And we have to like merge them together, which at the moment there is no easy way to merge these changes, not a built-in method to do that. It's not a really multi-developer environment when you have one PBIX file. I have to make my changes, save it, send it to you. You have to make your changes, then save it, send it back to me. And what happens if in the middle of that we suddenly make changes both at the same time? When we continue doing everything in one Power BI file, we also end up with a lot of other challenges, like you see more data coming into that solution. You start with 2 tables, then 20, then 200 tables. I've seen models with over hundreds of tables, all the relationships. It becomes really crazy, really a mess to work with. You might have like thousands of measures every time you open your Power BI file. It takes like 20 minutes to just open it up. Every time you want to create a measure, it takes like another 5 minutes waiting for the measure editor, the DAX editor to come up and allow you to write your measure. It becomes really heavy to work with such a thing. Your refresh time would be longer. You'll have a lot of challenges, a lot of maintenance problems if you do everything in one single file. Even if you want to make a small change, you have to open the whole file, make your change, and publish it again. It's a really high maintenance implementation. That is where the understanding of Dataflow comes in. So let's talk about one of these challenges. Let's talk about this, for example. Let's say I want to use one table. In Power Query, we call tables queries, right? I want to use one query or one table in multiple files. You might say, I don't really have that requirement, but imagine this. Let's say I've been a Power BI developer in a company. A sales team in my company came to me and said that we want a sales report, sales analysis report. And I went there and built a sales Power BI file for them that included, let's say, customer table, product table, date table. Usually you have that in most of the BI solutions anyway, and the sales transaction. So I put together these tables, and some of these tables I spent time to build it. Like my product table wasn't really one single table in the operational system. In the operational system, it was product, separate table, product category, another table, product color, another table, product brand, another table. It was like 5, 6 different tables. I merged them together. I cleaned up the data. I made sure that there is no duplicate values. I did some Power Query transformation steps and created that product table. And same for the date table. For the date table, you can use like a general Power Query script, which I'm going to show you, and that will give you like a whole date table. I built that sales Power BI file, let's say, and checked it with the sales team. They've been happy with that. But then they talked with other teams like inventory management team or warehouse team came to me and said that the report that you built for the sales team, can you build something like that for the warehouse inventory management? I say, yep, why not? I go ahead and create a new Power BI file. Why new? Because this is like totally different data. This is talking about inventory, that was about sales. So I go ahead and create this one. In the inventory PBIX file that I create, I have some tables that I didn't have in my first solution. Like I had inventory table, inventory movement table. I have warehouse table, but I also have some tables that I had in my previous implementation, such as product table. I still need to see which products are at each warehouse, and the date table. So there are some tables that are common between these two. So what I'm going to do with these tables, one easy solution, which probably like everyone is doing right now, is you can go to your sales PBIX file, copy that query, either copy the M script or even in Power Query Editor, you can just copy the query and paste it over here. You can copy multiple queries and paste it over here as well. So copy and paste is really simple process. And you think that the problem is solved. However, the problem is not solved. You even introduced like another problem into this, because now your product query or table and your date table, these are tables that have their source code in two different files, in the sales PBIX file, in the inventory PBIX file. If later on you want to make a change in the product table, for example, you want to add a filter in the table before doing anything else, or you want to merge another table into that as well, then you have to do it in the sales PBIX file and in the inventory PBIX file, or do it in one and then copy it again in the second one. You have to remember how many PBIX files are using this table. Your source code is like everywhere. You don't have a single version of truth for your source code, which becomes a really problem for the maintenance of this. Like date table is something you use in many Power BI solutions. If product table is used only in 2-3 Power BI files, the date table is probably used in 15 different Power BI files. And what happens if you suddenly decide to, let's say, add something into your date table, like add public holidays into that? Then you have to come and change all of these 15 Power BI files in there, right? It's really a maintenance problem. So what you can do with this, Dataflow is the solution for this. Now, what is a Dataflow? This is not a whole session about Dataflow, so I just touch on that briefly. So what is a Dataflow? Dataflow is a Power Query as a service, if you might call it this way. Power Query as a service running in the cloud and storing the result independent from Power BI. It is really important that to understand that Dataflow is independent from Power BI. You can use Dataflow and don't use Power BI at all. This is absolutely possible. Usually, however, because like Power BI works with the data-related solutions, so they kind of work with each other. You can right now, even without Dataflow, have a Power BI desktop solution. In your Power BI desktop solution, you actually have Power Query, right? Power Query gets data from the source, you do some data transformation, and then you load it into Power BI. When you publish it into the service, this is actually Power Query running cloud. That is not a Dataflow. It becomes Dataflow when it is independent from Power BI. When it is independent, it means that it stores data not into Power BI. It stores it somewhere else. And that is a really important thing to understand about Dataflow. So when it stores data in another destination, what is that destination? We are talking about Power BI data flows right now. The output for that is Azure Data Lake storage. There is also another type of data flows called Power Platform data flows, those that you can create it either in Customer Insight in Dynamics 365 or under Power Apps portal. Those are using another storage option as well, which is Command Data Services. We are not talking about that. Let's only focus on Power BI data flows for now, or data flows created in the Power BI environment. These are using Azure Data Lake as a storage. And the way that data is stored in this is that we'll have folders for, let's say, every workspace. Under every workspace, we have folders for every data flow. Under data flows, we have folders for every entity. Entity is basically a table. Under entities, we have files, CSV files. In CSV format, data is stored in this structure. Now, you might say, I don't really have a Azure subscription, not a data lake subscription, or not any Azure subscription at all. I'm not using that. Then does it mean that I can't use Dataflow? No, actually you can use Dataflow. Examples that I'm going to show you today, I'm not using any separate Azure subscription for that. I'm just using my Power BI Pro account. The thing is that when you use your Power BI account, part of the space that you have in the service, 10 GB, whatever it is for the internal data lake storage that you can use for your Power BI data flows to store data in it. So what is the whole story then? If you store the data into data lake, then what is the use of that? The use is that then in Power BI desktop, you can go ahead and get data from the result of that data flow. So it makes actually your data preparation layer totally separate, totally abstract from the rest of your Power BI modeling. You can do your data transformation, store it in a CSV file in Azure Data Lake storage using the data flow, and then Power BI gets data from that. So if we want to use something like that, how would our implementation look like? That implementation that I explained about two different files, the sales PBIX file and the inventory PBIX file. In that scenario, we'll have our shared tables, shared dimensions, fact tables, whatever it is, all of our shared tables to be processed in a data flow. In one data flow, you can have more than one table, of course. So here I can have in this data flow the date dimension and the product if I want to. This has the source code only in one place. It processes the data only once. It doesn't process it twice, 3 times like what we had before. And those Power BI files, they get data from the result of this data flow. If we go ahead and change this, then we need to do a refresh on those files structures to get this new data. The source code is in one place. The data transformation happens only once, not for every single file. This makes our solution much better. It also helps in many other things. For example, it helps with making the refresh time faster. How does it help in that? Let's say you have one Power BI file with a lot of heavy lifting transformations, merge, group by, things like that. And it takes really long time for your Power BI file to refresh. Let's say it takes 20 minutes to refresh. Now you can separate that heavy lifting transformations into a data flow that runs on a separate schedule, and you can have your Power BI file just getting data, just loading data from the result of that. Your Power BI file refresh would be shorter. Your overall refresh time is probably still about the same. If you don't do anything else about it, it's still the same, but your Power BI refresh time is shorter and it helps you to develop your Power BI solutions faster rather than waiting for 20 minutes for this to refresh. There are other benefits as well. One of other benefits is to create like a data warehouse using data flows. A lot of a lot of organizations who are using Power BI, they don't have the luxury of having a separate ETL tool, paying for something such as SSIS, Azure Data Factory, having something such as Azure SQL Data Warehouse or Azure Synapse, let's say, Azure SQL Database. These are components that you need to invest on those, like pay licensing and things like that. A lot of organizations that are using Power BI, they are really like small businesses, many of them. They don't have this luxury. They can use Dataflow without paying anything extra, without paying any extra fees to build that data warehouse structure inside Azure Data Lake using those entities. And these can be built through one or more than one data flows. All of that is possible just with your Power BI licenses, which is making your solution kind of in enterprise level, but without paying all of those like extra licensing fees that you had to pay for those other products. So let me show you an example of how Dataflow looks like. Now, the thing about Dataflow is that it is a service-only feature. It cannot be created in the desktop. So let me show you this sample model first. Here I have 3 tables. This is a sales model. I have 3 tables. I have a customer table, sales table, product table. Now in my sales analysis, I would also like to do analysis of this on a daily basis. There is a built-in date table in Power BI, but I'm not going to use that because I want to use a date table that has fiscal columns in it and things that I use in my own organization. So I do have a date table script. This is a Power Query script for a date table. You can actually download it from my blog. It's absolutely free, available there, right? If I copy this script and come here, create like a blank query, paste it there, this will just generate a date table for me. Really easy, I can use it here. But then the problem would be in any other Power BI file, whenever I want to use it, I should go and say get data from blank query and copy that query over here. If after some time I want to change it, I get to that challenge that I explained earlier, that I have to go to every file and change that structure. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to build that date table in a Dataflow and then get data from the Dataflow here. So to create that Dataflow, you need to go to the Power BI service, Power BI website. That is at the moment the only place you can go and author or create a Dataflow. In this, for example, organizational workspace, I can go ahead and create a new Dataflow. There are different ways to create it, and we are not talking about like deep dive Dataflow experience. I just choose this option, which is creating new entities. Entities are basically tables in the Dataflow environment. When I click on that, this brings something like this, which is Power Query online experience, very similar to Power Query desktop experience. There are a few differences, however, but you see most of the data sources we have available here. For example, I can go and choose, let's say, SQL Server database if I want to get data from there, set up the server database. If it is on-premises, I can choose my gateway for that and do all the configuration. Now, for this example, I don't really need to use any of those because I have the entire query. So I just choose blank query. And then I paste that script over here. That is a quite generic date dimension script. I can set the start date, end date, what is fiscal year, start month, what is the day of week start, and things like that. I'm not going to change any of those. This is not going to need on-premises data gateway as well because this is just automatically generated. I click on next. This is going to bring the Power Query editor online experience, very similar to Power Query editor in Power BI desktop. Again, there are a few things that are different in terms of the editor itself, but mainly they are kind of the same. Now I can call this table date table. You can also do further transformations here if you want to, but I don't really need in this case. Everything is built. I can see all the steps of transformations here as well. Now, in one data flow, you can have more than one table. I can get data from another place. I can get my product table also here. I can get some other tables. For this example, however, I'll stick to this single table. I save and close this. After building all of your tables, you save and close it. I'm going to call it Power BI Portugal data flow. Now, a data flow, this is one of the differences between data flow and creating this in Power BI Desktop. In Power BI Desktop, when you create it, it automatically just loads data into that. Here, this date table doesn't have any data in it yet. I have to refresh the data flow to get data into that, which I can do it easily by going to that data flow. I have to first find it. So many data flows here. I think I called it, yeah, this one. So refreshing this data flow, and normally you schedule it to refresh, very similar to scheduling Power BI dataset refresh. You have the same options here as well. So here I refreshed it manually. Now going back to my Power BI desktop. Now imagine this type of, let's say, user. Let's say I'm a data modeler. I want to build this data model. I know I have a sales table, customer table, product table. I know I need a date table, but I don't really know how to create a date table. However, I've heard from someone that they have created a date table. It is available in the data flow and I have access to it. I can easily go and say get data, choose Power BI data flows. I can choose that. And then you need to log in with your account. Of course, I've done already these things. I don't need to enter credential for now. I'll see all the workspaces that there's a data flow under those. This was the one that I created a data flow, and my data flow was called something, yeah, here, Power BI Portugal data flow. I'll expand that. I see the date table here, and I see all the data in it. So this is totally abstract from me, that how this date table is actually created, or if there was other tables, I would have seen them all here as well, right? It's totally abstract for me how this is created, but I can easily load it into my Power BI solution and use it. I don't really need to create that table myself. I just load it like that. The source code is now in the Power BI data flows, not in these Power BI solutions. If later on we decide that this date table that we have created in the data flow needs some changing, we can easily go to that data flow, edit entities. We can go and add a few steps or remove some steps, do whatever transformations we want. All we need to do then in Power BI Desktop is to go to the Power Query editor, refresh it so that we get the new metadata coming in. Everything works just like that. We have one single version of the source code. It is transformed only once. We can reuse it as many times we want in as many as Power BI files we want. Now I'll go to the second part. We'll do all of these and at the end we'll check for the questions. The second part is a dataset. So you learned about data flow. Now let's talk about dataset. What is a dataset? If you worked with Power BI, dataset is not really, let's say, an obvious concept to see. You need to dig a little bit into your Power BI solution to find out about dataset. Building everything in one Power BI file, you end up with one PBIX file. When you save your Power BI file, there's a one PBIX file that you get, and you think everything is in one file. But the fact is that it's not. We have an object called dataset, an object called report. When you have Power BI Desktop open in your system, you can actually go and see that there is a service running under Power BI Desktop called Microsoft SQL Server Analysis Services. Even if you don't run it on a machine with SQL Server Analysis Services installed, still you get this. This is where the Power BI dataset is hosted. This is where the actual data is, the tables, the relationships, the calculations, all of those DAX expressions, everything lives there in terms of the data. Report would be a visualization only on top of this, connecting to this and visualizing that data with it. When you publish this into the service, you'll get much better visibility because we have a section for dataset, we have a section for report, so they have different actions. For dataset, you can refresh. For report, you can like share the report. That is dataset then. So when it is dataset, now let's talk about this scenario. What if I have multiple report visualizers who want to use like the same calculations, same tables? Let's say I have Mike, Joe, they both want to go and do visualizations. They are great at doing visualization. They want to do visualizations on my Power BI model. So how they are going to do that? I should give them like a copy of my PBIX file to each. Like this is your PBIX file, this is your PBIX file. Go ahead and build your visualizations. But then whenever I make changes in my model, I should give them an updated model. But what happens to their existing reports they have built, right? It's not, again, a really good multi-developer environment. What we can do instead is to use something called shared dataset. Now, shared dataset isn't really like a different type of dataset. Any dataset can be used as a shared dataset. The way that shared dataset works is that instead of having like one dataset, one report, you can have one dataset, 10 reports, 5 reports, 15 reports, as many as reports you like. There is no limitation as far as I know. And you can create this shared dataset in different places. You can do that in Power BI Desktop, in Power BI Website. In both different places, you can go ahead and create a shared dataset. Now, let me show you that. Let me go to Power BI Website. I'll go to another workspace. Not this workspace. I think I use this one. Yeah, okay. So in this workspace, you see that I have some reports already. Like one of these reports is this movies report. I can open this, and this is some movies rating and sales information. I can see what are the best seller movies, the best rated movies, and movies that are best rated and best sellers, right? These visualizations are okay. They are not great, of course. Someone can do much better job in visualizing this. So let's say someone who is good at visualization come to me and say, I want to do some other visualizations on this. So instead of giving them the Power BI file, which includes model and report and everything, so that they can go and build their visualizations, which creates the problem of having to separate places of the source code, and whenever I want to update it, I have to send it again. It's not easy to merge. Instead of all of those problems, they can actually go to view related. This will show what is the dataset that this report is using. They can use this little button here, which means create a new report. That basically just creates a new report to the same dataset. They can go ahead and build whatever they want here as a visualization. And this is not only for Power BI website, this can be done in the desktop as well. Let me close this solution, open a new one. In Power BI desktop, you have the option to connect to an existing dataset in Power BI. This option is using the Get Data Power BI dataset. Not data flows, this time we are talking about dataset. So I can use dataset. Then it will show me all the datasets that my account has access to. Now, this might be datasets that I have not created, but they are somehow shared with me. I have access to it. They are either in a workspace that I have access to it, or some other methods of sharing. There is also a labeling system in this scenario that's called endorsement. because everyone is creating dataset, you need to find a way to label your dataset and say, this is a dataset that I have already tested, it is going to work fine, or this is a dataset that I have created, but I haven't tested it. That is what this endorsement is. The creator of that dataset or someone who is whose their task is to go and check the datasets can go and set these to be certified, promoted, or nothing at all. The default is no endorsement. Promoted is like one level up, and then certified. You can call it concepts of bronze, silver, gold reports, right? It's a labeling system, but it helps your users to understand which datasets are good to use. And usually those are certified comes first, then promoted, then those without any labels. In this case, I know that this is a dataset I'm going to work with. I can go ahead and select this dataset, create the connection for that. Now, when I use Power BI like this, Power BI changed to become a live connected model. Here you can see that it is saying that connected live to the Power BI dataset in that workspace. And when it is connected live, it means that I cannot edit the transformations here. You see this is grayed out. I can, however, do any visualizations I want. I can, for example, bring worldwide sales by title of movies. This is worldwide sales by title of movies, making it like this chart. I can do whatever I want in terms of visualizations, but let's say this is a visualization, right? Now I can save this, and you can create like as many as pages you want, as many as visualizations you want. I can save this now. Let me say I save it in my desktop, calling it PBI PT movies. And then publish it. Now I can publish it either to the same workspace or I can publish it to a totally different workspace. That's absolutely fine. I'm going to publish it into the same workspace for now. And it is already published there. So going back to my workspace, closing this one, we don't need this, going back here. So now I should have PBI PT movies. Here it is. That's my report. When I go and see the report, this is exactly the report that I built, but this report doesn't have a new dataset. When I go to view related, I see that this is using exactly the same dataset that we had for that previous report. This is that dataset. In fact, if I go and look at that dataset, let me go to that dataset and look at it. This is this dataset. When I look at this dataset using view lineage, you can see that this is my dataset. This dataset gets data from a couple of web sources. It is not getting data from Dataflows, but best practice is to have it creating data, get data from Dataflows. We'll talk about that in the next section. And then I have like all of these reports. All of these reports, they might be even in other workspaces or in this workspace, and they are all using this. Here you can see that actually I have 24 reports using this dataset in 3 different workspaces. That means whenever I go and change this, all of those would be getting the updated information in it, right? They don't need to have a copy of their model. I have separated the visualization layer from the modeling layer. And previously with the Dataflow, you learned that how we can separate the modeling layer from the data preparation layer. So that is a shared dataset. Now to put everything together as the last section, and then we'll take questions. I know you have quite a lot of questions to discuss, is the architecture part together. So you learned about Dataflow, you learned about datasets, how they are working together in building a Power BI solution in practice. This is a good architecture that I advise you to follow, which means creating 3 different layers of implementation. One is your data flow, which is where you get data from different sources, you do your data transformations. This can be your heavy lifting transformations, or it can be like simple transformations as well. That stores the data into Azure Data Lake storage as CSV files, as a stored data. Then you can have your second layer, which is your shared data set. These can be like different datasets, one dataset for sales, one dataset for inventory. They can share different tables, which is absolutely fine because their shared tables are coming from Dataflows. And then as the last layer, you can have visualization, which can have like as many as reports visualizations on top of that shared dataset. You'll have 3 different types of developers working in this implementation. The person who builds Dataflow is a person who is good at Power Query, understanding how to get data from different sources, merge it, good at writing MS script sometimes. The person who builds shared dataset needs to understand the relationship between tables, creating calculations, DAX expressions. And the person or people who are building the visualizations, they need to have a good understanding of the user experience and the graphic part of it. When you build your solution like that, you have even the flexibility to change the tool that you use in one layer. For example, if we talk about the visualization part, you have a lot of Excel users in many organizations. Those Excel users, they like to use Excel for their visualization because they are more flexible with that. Now, in Power BI, we have export to Excel. I don't really recommend it because that becomes like disconnected from your model whenever you have new data that doesn't really have it. We have also something called analyzing Excel, which connects to your data set from Excel, live connection, which means that you get the new data as soon as you refresh your Excel file. That means that your visualization layer would become Excel and you have your shared dataset and Dataflow. Or sometimes your organization might be limited. Let's say the CEO or someone in the board of directors decided to use like another tool, like Tableau, Click, things like that. Now they are good visualization tools, but they are not a really good tool for modeling and things like that, right? That's not a problem. Power BI got their back. We can have modeling in Power BI and use those tools for visualization. That is using a specific feature in Power BI, which is a premium feature at the moment called XMLA endpoint. Using that in Tableau or any other tool, you can connect to existing Power BI solution and do your visualization even with another tool. Or paginated reports. Paginated reports are type of reports that are full designed for printing. Let's say you define an A3 page with pagination, with this much margin and things like that. That can also get data from a shared dataset. So the fact is that this layer can be like totally different sets of visualizations because this layer is separated from the model and the data preparation. You can easily switch to another visualization. That is one of the good things about this multi-layer implementation, which is not really a new architecture. Whenever I talk about it, sometimes I hear people that, Reza, what you are talking is not really new. Yeah, I get that because this is not new. A multi-layer architecture is like used everywhere. We had it long time ago when we had SQL Server, analysis services, reporting services, integration services. This multi-layered implementation was called BI Burger. There was a famous name for that. Or BI semantic model. That was also talking about multi-layer implementation. We are talking about exactly the same thing, but using the new features in Power BI, using things such as data flows, using things such as shared dataset instead of a tool such as SSIS to work with. These are tools that a Power BI developer can work with easily. Dataflow is not a core developer tool. It's something that a Power BI developer would be able to work with. You don't need, let's say, another tool. It is a multi-developer environment. You can reuse a lot of things that you have done. You get a better refresh time. You have decoupled the data preparation, data modeling, and the visualization, like 3 different layers, and you can replace any of these anytime you want. Now, as the last thing, because I get this question often that, Reza, you talked about Dataflow, you talked about Dataset, they seem to be both storing data. Now, what is really the difference? If you still have this question, here is like a summary of that. Dataflow is replacement of your Power Query layer, your ETL layer, your extract, transform, load layer. Dataset is replacement of your modeling, your DAX calculations, the relationship between tables and things like that. That is your modeling layer. In Dataset, you can do Power Query, but I don't recommend you to do that. I recommend you to leave the Power Query part to the Dataflow so that you can have a good separation. Dataflow's export would be input for dataset, like datasets export would be input for the visualization. That is how the things would work. The developer who built dataset needs to understand DAX very good. The person who builds Dataflow doesn't need to know DAX. This person can understand Power Query in a good level. Understanding DAX for that person might help in terms of building some design patterns and leaving something to be done in DAX. But basically, this person needs Power Query skill. Dataflow is going to help you to resolve the problem of needing one table in multiple places. Dataset, on the other hand side, is helping the problem of needing multiple report visualizers working with the same model, same DAX calculations and things like that. That was pretty much everything I wanted to mention to you. I have a whole video course on Power BI architecture. You can go and check it out in our academy, over 200 hours of video course over there. And this is a $30 discount for the first month of academy membership. You can go and use it with that coupon code. All of these I also publish it as articles in my blogs, and I have a Power BI architecture book as well. However, the book doesn't have these data flow concepts in it because this came after when I published the book. Okay, if there is any questions, I'm more than happy to go through it.
Thank you very much, Reza, for your amazing presentation. I will put you on the big screen as we have some questions for you. And sure. It's first thing before we go to the questions. It's funny to hear you talking about the book and the data flows, because I remember that once you published the book, the reason that you said that it would be an online book is because of the speed of that things change in Power BI, that you wouldn't publish a physical book because this would be easier for you to publish and keep up to date, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that Power BI architecture book was one of the, let's say, what you call it, paper books that is outdated. Yeah, whenever things are become paper edition in Power BI environment, things like this happen. I'm inclining these days more towards publishing like Kindle books because I can update it just easily. I just update my manuscript over there much faster. I've done that with my row-level security book right now, but haven't done that for my architecture book or anything else. That's my plan. Hopefully we'll get there.
All right. So let me share with you a couple of our questions from our members. We have about 12 questions. I will start by the ones that have more likes as usual. So one question from Pedro Ribeiro da Costa is if it's possible to connect to more than one data set. I assume that in a data flow, so meaning the connection between data sources and the data flows.
In Power BI, you can, at the moment, when you use live connection, when you say get data from dataset, you can have only one dataset. But this is changing really soon. In the roadmap documentation published by Microsoft, one of the things that is coming in October, hopefully, it might come earlier or later, is that you can have multiple live connection data sources. You can have like composite model on a live connection, which then enables you to have like even multiple data sets live connected, bringing some data from this, some data from that. That is a really big game-changing feature that is coming soon.
It's fantastic. That's very, very good news to know. And we have a second question. It is, can you help us understanding why using data flows is better than having a regular SQL table? So meaning doing this at a data warehouse level.
Another really good question, I say. Now, the thing is that like data flow is kind of like an ETL service, right? You can do your ETL service with stored procedures. You might have like stored procedures building this table, storing it in SQL Server, or you might use SSIS, doing all your transformations, storing it again in SQL Server. You might use Informatica, you might use Azure Data Factory, you might use any other ETL tools you want. And they are doing, at the end of the day, they are doing all the same thing. However, there are a few differences. For example, if we are talking about Power BI, let's say user type, Power BI user type, Power BI developer don't really know how to use SSIS or how to use SQL. If they want to learn that, they need to be in a learning curve to learn about that. However, they can work with Dataflow because that's Power Query. They learn it as part of the Power BI, right? They don't need to pay for SQL as a separate license. They can do that again in Power BI Dataflow because this is all part of their Power BI licenses. So I say they are doing exactly the same thing. If you already have things in SQL, just keep going with that. If you are new to this, you are only having Power BI experience, go ahead and do that in Dataflow. This depends on what skill sets you have, what licenses you've got, what type of implementation you have.
All right, that's very interesting. So it means that you already had that experience and you gave the end user the ability to work a little bit also with the data flows, right? How did it work for your experience with that?
Not end users actually to work with data flows. You can call them like your data engineers. Mm-hmm. These are data engineers, but not every data engineer know about SQL. I mean, ideally they would know. Ideally they would know about all other ETL tools as well. Ideally they would be like the best person knowing about all like database technologies and database languages and data integration tools. But in reality, we don't have like that skill set. It takes like ages to get that skill set. You can have someone only with Power Query skills doing the job of a data engineer using a data flow. That's the time.
That's why you
not
recently
a report visualizer.
You put recently an article also about the like maybe a dozen of roles related to Power BI right now. So that's exactly comes to the division of roles in the Power BI. All right.
Yes.
So we have also one question about. I know that data flows are created based on Power Query, but it would be interesting to be able to create web API calls with a language in Python. So do you know if there is anything in the roadmap in regards of this? So
not sure what it means. Like, do you mean that instead of using Dataflow, we use like Python with APIs that then Power BI can consume that instead of like using Python as our data transformation?
I suppose it's like running like the R or Python transformations that you can do in Power BI desktop, but in like you do it on the cloud.
Yeah. That is the tricky part because, I mean, it is good to use R and Python, but there is a bit of challenge with that because these are at the moment supported with personal gateway, not with on-premises gateway. And that means that you cannot have it used in Dataflow. The reason that these are not supported in the enterprise gateway is, or on-premises gateway, is the security things that comes with it. Because when you run an R script and Python script, you can do like everything with that, right? If I have that ability to pass that kind of script through my on-premises gateway, I can do everything in that server that I'm connecting to that. It's like a security problem. That is why this is not supported in there. This is only supported in personal gateway. So it's quite unfortunate. We can't use all of those great features of these two languages in the data flow, unfortunately. But yeah, that is a limitation, at least for now, unless there is a solution for that later on. Hopefully something comes as a workaround for that.
Yes, and that's already a very good point and a very good reason to consider, of course. We have another question from Wesley, which is, if we have a lot of reports in a data based on the same data model, are there some restriction about memory or process resources on top of it?
A lot of reports in a data model. I guess you are talking about a lot of report visualizations connecting to one data model. No, not really. The way that Power BI memory management works, or let's say the whole analysis services, because Power BI behind the scene is analysis services tabular engine, is that there is part of memory consumed for the data, right? For like type of relationships, for some calculated columns, for tables itself, and part of memory for measures, which is by the user. So it doesn't matter I have like hundreds of reports, but it does matter how many concurrent users I have on these reports. Like, for example, if I have 2,000 people going and watching a table with 20 measures in it, in a table with, let's say, 1,000 rows in it, that makes really heavy on the visualization side to process all of these on top of the model. So my Power BI, let's say, need to cover that, which usually you need a premium capacity for that, or a separate Azure Analysis Services or something like that, right? But in terms of just having, let's say, 200 reports, nobody using it, no, that doesn't matter. The actual users, end users, that matters.
Okay.
Concurrent users.
Right. And another question is about, so with data flows, and in the case there are standard DAX measures on top of it, can we have a template with those measures so that the content creator can also leverage from it?
Not sure if you mean what you mean, but if you mean, like, for example, you have some predefined DAX calculation and you want to use it like in this model and create them all, tools such as Tabular Editor are fantastic tools to do that. Like what Rui mentioned earlier in this call was the external tools option that you get in Power BI Desktop that
yes,
creates
in this
much
month's
faster connection. Yes, so you can connect it to your model, create all the calculations you want, especially like for time intelligence scenarios. You can just do few clicks and you get like 10 different time intelligence calculation built in your model without writing any line of code, which is really fantastic.
Okay. And then we have another question, which is, we have a question if there is a way to refresh data flows besides the scheduled refresh.
You can schedule data flows to be refreshed, like when you schedule Power BI dataset to be refreshed, you can schedule data flows also to be refreshed. If you mean by that you want to like manually refresh data flows, you can do that as well. There is also REST API functions to refresh your data flow. So you can have something like a PowerShell script that first refresh the data flow, then refresh the Power BI dataset. This can be like right after each other with that script type of things, but it is not like a built-in feature that you go to the website and say this to be done after that, unless you set the timing in a way you want.
Okay. I see here from one of the moderators also the suggestion of the REST API to refresh data sets based on the data flow, right? So that's a good option to do it too. So I think we covered the questions that we had here, and we had about a dozen questions so far. So I think we finished this. So thank you very much, Reza, for your amazing session and also for being with our community. We will also publish the video too, and we'll put links also to the amazing content that you also had from Radacad. And so thank you again, and I hope to see you soon in another event in our community, being online or being live maybe.
Thank you for organizing, for the opportunity, and thank you all for joining us. Hopefully we'll do it sometime, not this session, probably like another session in person in Portugal.
Okay, thank you. Let's see you soon. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye, everyone.